The invitation was impossible to ignore, though I tried. For 3 days, it sat on my kitchen counter, the black envelope as sleek and mysterious as its sender. No name, just a single card inside embossed with gold. A night to remember. It had come from a woman I'd only met briefly, a radiant blonde named Vanessa at a friend's party last month. She was magnetic, her every word dripping with confidence, and her laughter had lingered in the air like perfume. When she'd slipped the envelope into my hand, she whispered, "You'll love this," before disappearing into the crowd. I was newly single, still licking the wounds of a breakup that had left me feeling undesirable and restless. The idea of attending a party of this nature, well, it was thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. I wasn't prudish, but the unspoken promise of a swingers party came with its own set of expectations. Finally, curiosity won out. I chose my outfit carefully, a fitted burgundy dress that hugged my figure just enough to command attention but not too much to scream desperation. My reflection stared back with approval, a woman I barely recognized. I dabbed perfume on my pulse points and slipped on my heels. Each step toward the door waited with anticipation. The venue was a mansion tucked into a secluded hillside. As I approached the iron gates, I realized there was no going back. Warm light spilled from the windows, illuminating a pathway lined with candles. I could hear faint music, a sultry jazz melody that set my heart racing. The air felt charged, humming with possibilities. Inside, the atmosphere was intoxicating. Velvet drapes framed the dimly lit room, and laughter mingled with the sound of clinking glasses. A server passed by, offering champagne. I took a flute, my hand trembling slightly as I scanned the room. Couples and singles mingled effortlessly, their movements smooth, their intentions veiled but unmistakable. Vanessa appeared as if conjured by my unease. "You made it," she exclaimed, pulling me into a quick embrace. Her dark green dress shimmered in the low light, and her smile was disarmingly warm. "I knew you'd be curious." I smiled back, hoping she couldn't sense the knot of nerves in my stomach. "It's not what I expected. Better, right?" She winked, slipping an arm around my shoulders to guide me through the crowd. "The first time's always overwhelming, but you'll find your rhythm. Just relax." Her confidence was infectious. By the time we reached the main living area, I was sipping champagne and easing into the rhythm of light conversation. The room seemed to pulse with energy, an unspoken promise of indulgence and freedom. A man caught my eye from across the room. He was leaning casually against the bar, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the looseness in his stance. Dark hair, piercing eyes. He raised his glass slightly in a silent toast, and I felt a flush creep up my neck. Vanessa noticed, of course. "Go," she whispered with a sly grin. "Have fun." I didn't move right away. My feet felt glued to the plush carpet as I stood there, champagne flute in hand, the bubbles tickling my throat but doing nothing to ease the fire spreading through me. His gaze was magnetic, unwavering yet not aggressive, a subtle pull that dared me to approach and maybe to let go of the hesitation clinging to me like a shadow. Vanessa's whisper still lingered in my ear. "Have fun." She'd said it so lightly, like she already knew the ending of a story I hadn't started yet. I swallowed the rest of my drink, placed the glass on a passing tray, and willed myself to move. The room seemed to part for me as I walked toward him. Or maybe I imagined that. I was suddenly hyper-aware of everything. The rustle of dresses, the faint smell of sandalwood mingling with wine, and the low hum of intimate conversations around me. Every step felt like a test, each one asking, "Are you ready for this?" By the time I reached him, I was sure he could hear my heart pounding. Up close, his presence was even more striking. His dark eyes studied me, not in that predatory way some men do, but like he was sizing up a puzzle he was eager to solve. "Hi," I managed, my voice softer than I intended. A flicker of a smile crossed his lips. "Hello." His voice was deep, smooth, and laced with something I couldn't quite name. "You're new here." It wasn't a question. I nodded, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "First time." He smiled fully now, a slow, deliberate expression that felt like a reward. I could tell. You wear your curiosity well. I laughed, more out of nervousness than anything else. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, he said, his tone teasing but sincere. I'm Ethan, by the way. Madison, I replied, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease just a fraction. There was something about him that put me at ease, even as it made my pulse race. Is this your regular scene? Ethan tilted his head slightly, considering me. I wouldn't call it regular, no. I come when it feels right. When the energy's good. I raised an eyebrow. And tonight, the energy is perfect. Something in the way he said it made my skin prickle. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he looked at me like I was part of whatever magic he felt. I didn't know if it was the champagne or the ambience or just the sheer novelty of the night, but I felt a spark of confidence I hadn't expected. Show me, I said. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but his surprise melted into amusement. Are you sure? I'm here, aren't I? The words felt bold as they left my mouth, but they tasted good. Felt good. Ethan chuckled, setting down his drink. All right then, Madison. Let's see if you're ready. He led me toward a quieter corner of the house, where the lighting was dimmer and the chatter softer. A few couples were scattered across velvet sofas, their heads bent close in intimate conversation. The air was thicker here, the tension more palpable. Ethan stopped near an unoccupied couch and gestured for me to sit. I hesitated but sat down, smoothing my dress over my legs. Ethan sank into the seat beside me, close but not too close, giving me space to breathe. He leaned back, studying me with those dark eyes, and I realized he wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't pushing. He was waiting for me. I glanced around, taking in the atmosphere. There was something liberating about being here, in a room where everyone seemed to exist without the usual pretenses or walls. I could hear soft laughter from one corner, the clink of a glass from another. It was intimate but not suffocating, and for the first time in what felt like months I felt free. You're overthinking, Ethan said softly, his voice cutting through my thoughts like a knife through butter. Am I that obvious? I asked, smiling despite myself. He shrugged, his grin returning. Little. But that's part of the fun. What is? I asked, genuinely curious. Watching someone let go, he said, his voice dropping just slightly. Watching them realize they don't have to be anyone but themselves. Something about the way he said it, the way his gaze stayed steady on mine, made me feel seen in a way that was rare, almost too rare. I didn't say anything for a moment, just held his gaze, letting the weight of his words settle over me. And then, without thinking, I smiled. A real smile this time. Maybe you're right. Maybe, he echoed, his grin widening. Or maybe I'm just good at reading people. Or maybe, I countered, leaning back into the soft cushions, you're just a little too smooth for your own good. Ethan laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made me forget the tension I'd been carrying all night. I'll take that, he said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast. I don't remember exactly when I stopped thinking so much and started feeling. Maybe it was the way Ethan's laughter softened the sharp edges of my nerves, or the way his steady presence anchored me in a sea of unfamiliar faces. All I knew was that I wasn't the same person who had walked into that house. You're more relaxed now, Ethan said, his voice low, like he didn't want to disturb the atmosphere that had settled between us. Am I? I asked, tilting my head. He gave me a slow nod, a half smile playing on his lips. Your shoulders aren't as stiff, and you're smiling more. You look like you're having fun. I laughed, a light, airy sound that felt foreign but welcome. Is that your goal? To make me have fun? Only if it's working, he said with a shrug, though the glint in his eyes suggested he already knew it was. He stood then, holding out a hand. Come with me. To where? I asked, looking up at him. You'll see, he replied, his tone casual but teasing, as if daring me to trust him. I hesitated for a split second before placing my hand in his. His grip was warm and steady, a stark contrast to the cool air brushing against my skin as he led me through the room. We moved past clusters of people, some laughing in intimate circles, others leaning closer than seemed polite in public. Nobody paid us much attention, and I felt strangely invisible, like we were moving through a dream that belonged only to us. He brought me to a room at the edge of the house, where the soft thrum of music seemed to seep through the walls. It was smaller than the others, dimly lit and intimate. A single record player sat in the corner, the needle scratching gently against the grooves of a jazz melody that filled the space like a whisper. Ethan let go of my hand and turned to face me, his expression unreadable but calm. "Do you dance?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Not well." "Perfect," he said, his smile widening as he reached for my hand again. "Neither do I." He pulled me closer, one hand settling lightly on my waist while the other held mine. The movement was so natural, so effortless, that I barely had time to protest. "There's no one here to judge you," he murmured as we swayed to the music. "I'm judging myself," I admitted, though my words were softened by the smile tugging at my lips. "Stop that," he said gently, his eyes meeting mine. "Just listen to the music." And I did. For the first time in a long time I let myself go. I let the melody guide my steps and stopped worrying about whether I was doing it right. Ethan's movements were smooth but unpolished, and it made me feel better about the occasional misstep. The song shifted into something slower, softer, and Ethan's hand tightened slightly on my waist, pulling me closer. My heart stuttered at the proximity. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the steady rise and fall of his chest as we moved together. "This isn't so bad, is it?" he asked, his voice a soft rumble that seemed to vibrate through me. "No," I admitted, my own voice quieter now. "It's not bad at all." I didn't know if it was the music, the atmosphere, or the man standing inches from me, but something shifted in that moment. The rest of the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of our breaths and the rhythm of our movements. For the first time that night, I wasn't thinking about what might happen next. I wasn't thinking at all. I was just there in that moment with him. And for once that was enough. The record's final notes faded into silence, leaving the air between us thick and humming with something unspoken. For a moment, neither of us moved, the quiet settling around us like a cocoon. Ethan's hand lingered at my waist, his fingers just barely brushing the fabric of my dress. "I have a feeling you don't let yourself relax often," he said, his voice so soft it almost felt like a secret. I smiled, looking away for a second to catch my breath. "You're not wrong." "Why is that?" His question wasn't prying, just curious, like he genuinely wanted to know. I hesitated, chewing on my bottom lip as I searched for an answer. How could I explain it to someone I'd only just met? That I'd spent the last few years building walls so high, even I wasn't sure how to tear them down. That I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be. Instead I shrugged. Old habits die hard, I guess. He didn't press further, and I was grateful for it. Instead he stepped back, putting just enough space between us to let me breathe. "Come on," he said, holding out his hand again. "There's more to see." I took his hand without hesitation this time, the warmth of his palm grounding me as he led me back into the main room. The energy there was different now. Looser, more charged. People had gravitated into smaller groups, their laughter quieter but their movements more intimate. Vanessa caught my eye from across the room. She was perched on the edge of a chaise lounge, her legs crossed and her smile sharp. When she saw me, her expression shifted to one of playful curiosity. I gave her a small wave, but she only raised an eyebrow in return, like she was silently saying, "I told you so." Ethan brought me to a quieter corner, where a bar was set up against the wall. He handed me a glass of sparkling water this time, his lips quirking into a knowing smile. "You'll thank me later." I laughed, the sound lighter than I expected. Fair enough. For a while we just stood there watching the room. It felt good to have a moment to catch my breath, to let the night settle around me without feeling like I had to do anything. Ethan leaned against the bar, his posture relaxed, but his eyes were sharp as they scanned the crowd. "Does it feel like you expected?" he asked after a while. I thought about it for a moment. No, I admitted. I thought it would feel heavier, I guess. More intimidating. And now, I shrugged, smiling. Now it feels like I could get used to it. Careful, he said with a soft chuckle. That's how it starts. Before I could ask him what he meant, Vanessa appeared, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. She was holding 2 glasses of red wine, but she handed both of them to someone else before turning her full attention to us. Well, look at you, she said, her tone playful but laced with genuine warmth. I was beginning to think you'd vanished. Just exploring, I said, trying to sound casual. Vanessa's eyes flicked between me and Ethan, her smile widening. And what do you think so far? It's different, I said honestly. She laughed, the sound rich and unrestrained. That's one way to put it. Ethan leaned in slightly, his tone teasing. You're not scaring her off, are you? Vanessa smirked. Oh, please. She's tougher than she looks. Before I could decide if that was a compliment or not, Vanessa reached out and touched my arm lightly. Come with me for a second. There's someone I want you to meet. I glanced at Ethan, unsure. His expression didn't change, but he gave me a slight nod, as if to say, go ahead. Vanessa didn't wait for me to decide. She took my hand and led me through the room, weaving expertly between groups of people like she'd done this 100 times before. We stopped near the staircase, where a man was leaning casually against the banister. He was older than most of the people in the room, but there was something striking about him. His sharp jawline, the streaks of silver in his dark hair, the way he held himself with effortless confidence. Madison, this is Jonathan, Vanessa said, her voice smooth and lilting. He's one of the reasons nights like this exist. Jonathan turned to me, his smile easy but commanding. It's a pleasure, he said, holding out his hand. I shook it, feeling the weight of his presence immediately. Likewise. Vanessa gave me a sly smile before slipping away, leaving me alone with him. You're new to all this, Jonathan said, not as a question but as a statement. Is it that obvious? I asked, my smile a little self-conscious. Not obvious, he said, his tone measured. But I can always tell when someone is still finding their footing. He stepped a little closer, his eyes never leaving mine. The question is, Madison, are you enjoying yourself? I hesitated, caught off guard by the intensity of his gaze. I think so, I said finally. He nodded, as if that was exactly the answer he expected. Good. That's all that matters. There was something about him that made my pulse quicken, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. He wasn't intimidating exactly, but he was undeniably commanding. Enjoy the rest of your night, he said, his smile softening just a fraction. Something tells me you're just getting started. And with that, he disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with more questions than. I stood there for a long moment after Jonathan disappeared, trying to steady my thoughts. His presence had been like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending ripples through the calm I'd started to feel. There was something about him, something I couldn't quite name, that lingered even after he was gone. I shook it off, taking a deep breath. The night wasn't over yet, and I wasn't ready to retreat into the shadows. Not yet. Vanessa reappeared at my side like she'd been watching from a distance. So, she asked, her tone dripping with curiosity. So what? What did you think of Jonathan? She pressed, her eyes sparkling like she already knew the answer. I trailed off, searching for the right word. Intense. Vanessa laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. That's one way to put it. But he's harmless, I promise. He just has a knack for making people question themselves. I wasn't sure if that was supposed to comfort me or not. What does he do here? She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice as if she were sharing a secret. He's not exactly in charge, but let's just say people listen to him. He's persuasive. Before I could ask what she meant, Ethan returned, a fresh glass of water in his hand. He handed it to me without a word, his expression calm but watchful. Did Vanessa drag you into her schemes? He teased, glancing between us. Schemes? I asked, raising an eyebrow at Vanessa. Oh, please, she said with a dramatic wave of her hand. You make me sound so devious. Ethan chuckled, the sound low and warm. You are devious. Vanessa rolled her eyes but didn't argue, her lips curving into a mischievous smile. Fine. Guilty as charged. She glanced at me again, her gaze softening. But seriously, are you okay? You've been thrown into the deep end tonight. I nodded, feeling a flicker of gratitude for her concern. Good. Really? Good, she said, her smile widening. Because the night's about to get even better. Before I could ask what she meant, a soft chime rang out, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. It was subtle but effective, the sound cutting through the low hum of conversation like a signal. Vanessa's eyes sparkled with excitement. That's our cue. Cue for what? Asked, my curiosity piqued. You'll see, Ethan said, his voice laced with mystery. They led me to a grand staircase at the edge of the room, where small groups were beginning to gather. The air shifted as we climbed the steps, growing heavier, more charged. It wasn't oppressive. It was exhilarating, like standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. The upper level of the house was quieter, the lighting even dimmer. The hallway stretched out before us, lined with doors that were slightly ajar, revealing glimpses of candlelit rooms and velvet-draped furniture. Soft laughter and murmured voices drifted through the air, mingling with the faint strains of music from below. Vanessa stopped at one of the doors and turned to me, her expression both playful and serious. This is where the real magic happens, she said, her tone low. But remember, you're in control. Always. Her words settled over me like a safety net, and I nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. Ethan stepped closer, his presence grounding me. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with, he said, his voice steady. This is your night. I looked between the two of them, their expressions so different yet both so reassuring. Vanessa was electric, alive with excitement, while Ethan was calm, a steady flame in the midst of the storm. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than they probably realized. Vanessa smiled, giving my arm a squeeze before disappearing down the hallway. Ethan stayed by my side, his gaze steady as he waited for me to make the next move. I turned back to the open door in front of me, the flickering candlelight casting shadows that danced across the walls. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, the unknown stretching out before me. Ready? Ethan asked, his voice soft but firm. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of the night settle over me. Ready. And with that I stepped inside.